Hi, welcome back to another long overdue scent notes video. This is a video I recorded a couple months ago. Wasn't happy with it, then life got in the way. You may have heard that I have been working on an exhibit at the Missouri Botanical Gardens that is now open. It's on scent. I had the opportunity to recreate a few scents of flowers in the garden. So I did Ixora, woolly lavender, witch hazel, and blue bop water lily, which has been getting a great reception. It's open at Missouri Botanical Gardens until next March, so definitely if you have a chance to go see it, I'd highly recommend it. And on June 28th, I am doing a panel with the other perfumer involved, Weston Adam. We are going to answer some questions. It'll be a lot of fun if you can make it. It's free with museum admission, or I'm sorry, garden admission in the museum in the Botanical Gardens. With that out of the way, we'll get to the subject for today, which is about perfume concentration. A lot of people will talk about, if it's a certain percentage, it's Eau de Toilette. If it's another percentage, it's Eau de Parfum. Parfum extrait is, a certain percentage. And that is a guideline, but I think that's a gross oversimplification of how concentration works in perfumery, because there are a lot of different aspects that work together to do that, and concentration is just one of the many facets. We'll start with how the scent molecules work. When you look at a bright citrus scent, those are really small volatile molecules. That's why they burn off so quickly. When they're on the heat of your skin, they are really volatile, they're small, so they just take that heat and they just evaporate really quickly. So you get those first, whereas the big, thick, heavy molecules, they're less volatile, so they stick around longer. You don't smell them at first, and they slowly evaporate because they work with the heat on your skin. So things like sandalwood, or something deep and rich, or vanilla, something like that. That's going to be down on the larger end of the spectrum. That's why those are base notes, and why top notes are these really bright volatile molecules. So the way concentration works, you work in tandem with these things by, let's say, an Eau de Toilette concentration. Those tend to be more bright and they're more diffusive. They're more diffusive because they have less concentration, they're spread out on the skin more thinly, and they burn off more quickly. But you can use that to your advantage by, if you want to feature more citrus note or a bright floral note, you'll use those concentrations to do that. So you work in tandem with the design of the fragrance along with the concentration, so you can achieve the quality that you would want to do with an Eau de Toilette. So when you're designing, you're taking into account a few different options so you can kind of combine them together to get that desired quality that the label would have you have. So like if I had the same formula and I had an Eau de Parfum and Eau de Toilette, they wouldn't necessarily be right for each one, because molecules still work the same way they work no matter what. You can't just put a Eau de Toilette concentration into a Parfum extrait and expect it to perform, because it won't be balanced correctly for that concentration. You won't have the emphasis on the heavier, more less volatile notes, the ones that are really long lasting. And the way a Parfum extrait is going to be less projecting, because it doesn't have those more volatile molecules, just because it's not designed to do that. So you take into a lot of things in consideration when you're doing this. And so just by saying, I've had people tell me that they, the Eau de Toilette, they don't think that it's going to be long lasting because it's an Eau de Toilette. And that's not necessarily the case, because you can take fixative molecules, you can construct it so that there are longer lasting elements, and so they are balanced out and they will be long lasting. Or you can make it like an Eau de Cologne that's purposefully not long lasting, because you want, in the heat of summer, you just don't want something that lingers. You don't want something that's really thick and envelops you. You want something that's bright and kind of just, really works with the heat of your skin, the heat of the weather, everything in tandem. So I wanted to go over a few different of my fragrances to kind of illustrate this point. Two I wanted to compare are La Petite Prairie and Admiral. If you were to smell those in isolation without this knowledge of how they're composed, you might think that Admiral is the one that is more tilted towards the higher concentration, because it is thicker, richer, it has that kind of smoky vanillic type, and huge tonka bean. So those are going to have those really kind of heavier molecules that will last and make it feel thicker and richer. Whereas La Petite Prairie has a ton of citrus in there, and the florals, it does have like a carnation. You're going to get some of that spice in there, but it's not really going to be too standout. But suffice it to say, Admiral is actually a less concentration by a few percentage points than La Petite Prairie. La Petite Prairie is going to be 15%, Admiral is 12%. However, you wouldn't know that by the way they wear, because that is the way they designed La Petite Prairie. I did bump up the concentration because I wanted to make sure that the vetiver and some of those incense notes weren't getting lost in the mix. But those are supposed to be supporting casts. So I do an Eau de Toilette concentration, and I construct it so that these more volatile bright molecules are featured in the Eau de Toilette, the way it burns off. So it gives the impression of an Eau de Toilette, even though it's a higher concentration than Admiral, which does have some citrus notes. But those aren't meant to be featured. They're meant to add some air to this composition to keep it bright and sunny, like a bright sunny day on a riverboat. So I wanted to make sure I kept those kind of as a supporting cast. So they are lower in the mix, but however, I didn't want it to wear overly heavy because I still wanted it to feel light and bright. So I had a lower concentration. So it still is an Eau de Toilette concentration, and it wears like one, but it is on the heavier end of the spectrum. But you wouldn't guess it because it is, like I said, less concentration in this one than is in La Petite Prairie. Another one in the Chatillon Luxe line I wanted to talk about was Envoy. In the review on Saint Laurent, Ida, rightly so, said that she was surprised as an Eau de Toilette because it wears like an Eau de Parfum. And that is correct, and is something I thought about because Chatillon Luxe is Eau de Toilettes, but that's not necessarily the case they work, and I do have thought about that in retrospect now, that I may have boxed myself in a corner because this should have been technically an Eau de Parfum because the way it wears. The concentration, again, is going to be in what you would normally consider an Eau de Toilette concentration. However, I wanted to get the tail end of that gardenia where it was a lot of those brighter notes that kind of, as it's dying, you get those kind of deeper, richer, heavier notes to it. And so I wanted to represent those. And with that in mind, that's naturally going to lend itself to a heavier fragrance. And it's going to have it has some spice and some other things in there as well to kind of give it more that, add some more, something at top to it. So it's going to just contrast that deeper, richer, heavier notes. However, there's only so much you can do. Again, like I said, going back to composition, an Eau de Toilette concentration still may wear like an Eau de Parfum just because of the composition and the deeper, richer notes. Some of the musks in there that I use that really pull out those rich notes like gardenia are also big fixatives. So it's going to wear longer lasting, richer, maybe a little heavier on the skin, less diffusive, but still fairly diffusive for the weight of the composition just because of that lighter concentration. But again, it's going to wear more like an Eau de Parfum, and it's, rightly so, like I said on the Saint Laurent review, that was a good point and something I think is worth pointing out. In the Mayer olfactive line, I had two comparisons to kind of continue to illustrate this point. I wanted to compare my two sandalwoods, Waking Dream and Saint Auster. So Waking Dream, as you probably know, is an Eau de Parfum, whereas Saint Auster is an Extrait de Parfum. So Waking Dream has a lower concentration because I have the iris in there. So I wanted to make sure the iris didn't get lost. If I had it too heavy, you're gonna really drown in that kind of ambery sandalwood base that is in Waking Dream. The creaminess is really gonna take over, and you're not gonna get that bright kind of melancholy, watery iris note on the top. So with that, I wanted to do an Eau de Parfum. Even though this wears pretty heavy for an Eau de Parfum, it still is light, and you're gonna get that iris because of the concentration. Whereas the Saint Auster has a lot more rich notes, and I wanted to wear on the skin, longer lasting, less projection, less diffusion. However, it's really gonna pull out the sandalwood and the oud that I wanted to feature in this. And so therefore, I made an Extrait de Parfum concentration. I like this one's at 25% just because I didn't want to go too heavy, because I didn't want it to fall flat. So you still smell it, it still projects enough. However, at the end of the day, it is built to wear like a Parfum Extrait because it's just so bottom heavy. It doesn't have a ton of top notes to it. And it's just a warm, long lasting, like close to the skin fragrance that's not going to fill up a room, but it's something that's really just going to keep going and going. It's very tenacious. Finally, the last two I wanted to compare are Red Skies and Nefertiti, just because there are similarities between these two as well. Red Skies and Nefertiti both have kind of a citrusy note at the top. They have some notes of like, there's a kaffir lime leaf in Nefertiti that's going to kind of be similar to some of the lime in Red Skies. They both have the kaffir lime leaf in there. However, with Red Skies, I wanted to pull out some of those ozonic kind of aquatic notes. Not, I wouldn't say traditional aquatic, but it's more of a kind of a sea aquatic, not like a, the old school aquatic. It's kind of just more of an atmospheric aquatic. And Nefertiti, what I'm really pulling out in here is some of that, even though it's got the kaffir lime leaf and that kind of makes up that orchid leaf accord, you're gonna get some of the, you're gonna get that incense, you're gonna get the honey, you're gonna get the oud, you're gonna get those musks and the deep, rich elements that I really wanted to pull out. And I'm using that accord leaf at the top to kind of just balance it out and give it some air. And like I said, with the composition of this, is supposed to be kind of how Miles Davis inverted the composition of the song Nefertiti, where the rhythm is played by the brass and the saxophone, where the rhythm section almost plays the melody in a way. So it's kind of, so I really wanted to feature what would be the bass notes to kind of go with the bass and the drums, to pull those out a little bit more. Whereas in Red Skies, I wanted to have a contrast. So it's kind of more of an equal contrast between the top and the bottom, because Red Skies at night, sailors delight. Red skies in morning, sailors take warning. So therefore there's going to be that dark storminess, the sailors take warning, and the red skies at night, sailors delight. You're going to have that good weather, the aquatic, on a ship with the kind of some tropical flair to it as well. But it is a chypre in the end, so the chypre notes that are kind of signature, where you have the labdanum, the oak moss, the deep rich undertones there. It's going to be in here, but you also have added to like the bergamot that you would normally have at the top of a chypre. You're going to have some of those, kaffir lime leaf. You're going to have, some bright citrus petitgrain, things like that are at the top, where it's really balancing the two out. That's why an Eau de Parfum strength was right for this, because it is heavier. It has that chypre quality to it, and the concentration is, pretty high, but it also wears pretty light, because it is the composition has a lot of those lighter, brighter notes that are more volatile. So I hope that kind of makes sense, because I know, especially on the internet, it's a lot easier to say this is this, good, black, bad, black, white, and just have everything be overly simplified whenever the world is complex and perfumery is very complex. So I just wanted to make sure to give a little more context and so people can understand. When you see concentration, that's a starting point. Look at the notes, look at how it wears, just try it, wear it on the skin, and you'll learn just as much as you will you'll probably learn a lot more by taking those steps than you would just by looking at the concentration on the label. So that's my latest scent notes video. Too late in the video for me to go back and start over, so we're just gonna leave that in. Thanks for watching, and I will be recording another one very soon. I have some exciting news to announce, and this year I'm celebrating 10 years of being in business as a perfumer. So right now we have 10% off at Chatillon Luxe and Merrill Factives. So check those out through the end of June. 10% off all bottles and gift cards. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you soon.